Okay, there we are. Let's talk about uh, Cotton Mather, the Puritan minister and historian. Everybody likes to read Mather, and especially this work of his, The Wonders of the Invisible World, mostly because he shares with us his knowledge of the witch trials in Salem, Massachusetts. We've all heard of the witch trials and how the Puritans accused people of witchcraft. We've heard about the 200 people in the small town of Salem who were accused of being witches. And we've probably heard of the about 20 men and women who were actually hanged in town square in Salem, Massachusetts. And maybe some of us have actually read Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible, which takes as its focus these events. So um, here's the thing. If you ever actually go to the village of Salem in Massachusetts, you get some time, you want to stop by, and you're standing there in the middle of the town square, you have to wonder, really, how people could do that to each other. It's a fairly small town, and people would have known each other and known each other pretty well. So it's strange to think that God-fearing people who had strong faith would turn on each other and end up killing 20 people that they would have been used to seeing regularly. And it's disturbing, really, to think that this kind of thing could happen in the New World, a place where settlers came to begin new lives and to live with greater freedoms than the old world could provide. It's really shocking that things got so far out of hand. And killing one's neighbors should not be so easy to do. So here we get a small portion of a longer text that really justifies the Puritan belief in witches and Satan. And it defends the murder of those people as necessary acts that cleansed or attempted to cleanse the colonies of the influence of Satan. So the trial information that comes after the introduction is interesting in that Mather lists such odd details that it seems really ludicrous to us. If somebody has a cow die or suffers an ailment or a boil, we don't generally perceive those events as amounting to evidence against someone who might be a witch. And likewise, the claims that served as evidence seem laughable to us now. The people in the courtroom said with a straight face that the shape of Martha Carrier could wander around the countryside and sit on people and hit them in the back of their heads and do all kinds of things. They actually said that in court, and the people hearing the evidence in the courtroom believed it. It made sense to them. And then there's miserable, sad, old Phoebe Chandler, who testifies that she heard voices, and she assumed that it was Martha Carrier and that she had severe headaches that must have been brought on by Martha Carrier. And people said, uh-huh. So we can speculate about this woman, Martha Carrier, thanks to Cotton Mather, because it seems from what he says that everybody must have hated her guts. Why? Was she really obnoxious to people? Was she of a lower class, perhaps? Was she on the outside of society? Did she rub people the wrong way? What was it that determined that she could and should be killed by her neighbors? Mather tells us that the remarks by the witnesses came about without coercion, and that the other accused witches all gave their confessions freely and happily. I have to wonder what led to the confessions of those witches who said that they rode on a pole with Martha Carrier and Satan to a witch meeting. How do you confess to that? Maybe it really happened, but I'm a bit doubtful that actually happened. So where did this confession come from? Anyway, Mather tells us that the Puritans also made Mather's own children confessed to being witches, and they made the kids testify against their own mother. That's unnecessary. It suggests something rotten at the heart of Puritan culture. But the whole episode is suspect because, as Mather tells us himself, he wasn't even there. He is reporting at second hand about the proceedings of the trial, but he takes the evidence as gospel that this is what actually happened and it must be true. He doesn't question anything, but takes as authoritative evidence that Satan is doing his best to create a whole flock of witches who will ruin the Puritan establishment of law and order in Massachusetts. He takes that to be true, and it's a premise that is just a priori knowledge. I mean, the Puritans would have said, well, of course Satan is trying to destroy our society. So Mather's whole introduction lays out his claim for why he knows that Satan is working hard to destroy the colonies. He has no facts, but he creates a narrative that seems to be based on fact. And so the Puritans who read this account would have believed it and seen in it everything that he says as fact already. Now, in our own time, we tend not to believe in witches so much. And in our own time, we tend to accept that there is not a person named Satan who walks around us regularly and causes us to become wicked. You may or may not believe in Satan, but he probably doesn't figure into your day-to-day life. We generally accept, I think, that people are a mixture of good and bad, and sometimes our bad impulses win out, and we do things that can be hurtful or harmful to other people, but we don't generally blame our bad behavior on Satan. We have to accept personal responsibility for what we do. We don't usually blame someone else. The Puritans, though, seem perfectly happy to put all of the blame on Satan. They really saw themselves as a persecuted group who were struggling against evil in the name of God. So Mather did not have to work very hard to validate his claims. He merely had to explain to people who were already believers that witches, the witches that were found in Salem were a result of Satan's interference in the lives of the colonists. And he does this in the introduction. He explains how the colonists had begun God's good work in the New World and how that work had upset the devil's territories. He explains that the Puritans had much work to accomplish to defeat the devil and to establish God's will on earth. And then he confirms that all of the witches admitted that Satan had a plan in operation and that it was a life or death crisis in which the Puritans had to win or it would be the end of everything. He puts it in those terms. He creates drama, really. So once having established his shared values with his audience, and once he has established that there is a crisis, he then says, but, and this is a quotation, but I shall no longer detain my reader from his expected entertainment. So what he's about to share is a list of gruesome details and accusations against this woman, Martha Carrier, and he defines it as entertainment. This is a feature of Puritan society, I think. People who suffer, people who are unusual, people who are about to die, people who are grotesque in some way, are made into a story and a spectacle. The Puritans loved this. They loved the gallows confessions. They loved to hear about gruesome murders. They loved to hear about people committing bestiality. All kinds of weird stuff pop up in the Puritan literature. And so it says something about the oppressive society that the Puritans created. But, well, maybe we are the product of their culture, but finally, we're not very different in this respect. Our own ideas of entertainment, it seems, often consist of people who are easy to point at and ridicule. I mean, who among us has not watched Jerry Springer or Maury in the afternoon or some other show like that in which we stand in judgment of people who do not act as they should or people who do not act as we would do? So Mather gives us his entertainment, his audience. He gives them his entertainment. And he says he does it as a historian. He says he's not advocating any one side. He's just going to approach it objectively as a historian would. So we expect that he's just giving us the facts. What he says is not facts, but as he defines it, the truth. So there's a big difference, really, between the facts of a case and the truth. What he says is the truth. What he says is this: the truth will hurt no good man. And I guess you can accept that. But in this case, the truth did hurt people. It led to their hanging. And the thing is about the difference between facts and truth is that facts stay the same, but the truth changes depending on whose truth it is. So when he says the truth can hurt no man, it seems a bit slippery. It seems a bit rhetorical, finally. In any case, despite his best efforts to remain neutral, like a good historian would, he is clearly advocating for the death of Martha Carrier. He builds a case like a good lawyer would, and then at the very end of his segment, he calls her a rampant hag. Now, calling someone a rampant hag, how is that objective? How is that like a historian? So as you read this account, be on the watch for the many ways in which Cotton Mather makes use of rhetoric to explain and justify the actions of the people of Salem, Massachusetts.